When you go into work, you do not expect to lose a limb. When you go into work, you're not expecting to be harmed, and you're expecting that the company that you work for to put proper precautions in place so that you are not harmed at all. There's certain contingencies that need to be put in place in order for you to be able to come into work the next day. But that's not the case for a lot of workers, because when profit is the sole motive, well, of course, your safety is on the back burner. There was a story that actually came out that was shared to me. Shout out to you, Roger Meadows, for pointing this story out to me. I want to go into this. One of the first things I'm going to do is we're going to go into the article in a second, but I want to talk about details. And this is out of the Southern Poverty Law Center. Southern Poverty Law Center actually gives a testimony about how workers are treated in meatpacking plants in the United States. So let's get into this. And the sound is not as clear as I would like for it, but we shall press on.
My name is Tom Fritchie, and I'm a staff attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Under Article 5 of the American Convention on Human Rights, every person has the right to have his physical, mental, and moral integrity respected. Yet every day, workers in the United States meatpacking and poultry industries face brutal working conditions. These industries violate the fundamental human rights of many workers who come from all over the hemisphere by systematically exploiting the lack of work speed safety regulations in the United States. The U.S. in turn negligently permits these industries to inflict disabling harm on thousands of employees. The overwhelming majority of poultry processing and meatpacking workers suffer severe and crippling injuries due to tendon, nerve, joint, and bone damage caused by dangerous working conditions. And the most pervasive injuries are caused by fast work speeds. The industry's massive disassembly lines can slaughter and process 400 head of cattle an hour, or 10,000 chickens per hour.
Now let's stop right there. 400 head of cattle per hour. Have you ever been near a cow? Those are not small animals. Cows are huge. Like we'll see them on TV. Like, look, I am a city boy, just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. No, I'm not from Detroit, but here's the thing: I'm a city boy, right? I don't go near farms, but I did work at a dinner show. Dolly Parton's Dixie Stampede dinner show. Okay, it's not Dixie Stampede anymore because she took the word Dixie out of there because, racist connotations. So that's what Dolly Parton did. But I used to work for that dinner show. And one of the things that they have at the dinner show that are literally housed there are horses and buffalo. And they are comparable to cows. Those are not small animals. So when they say 400 head of cattle per hour, do you know the speed and power it takes to slaughter just one cow? You're doing 400 an hour? $10,000 chickens? And so to process at that speed is crazy. Why are they processing at that speed? Come on, sing it with me. Dun 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 dun. Money, 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 money. That's why. Because the faster you get it, That means the more product that gets put out there, that means the growth of profits. Not for the worker. No. Not for the worker. For the shareholders. For the CEO. For the CFO. For the COO. For the officers. Because they have a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. So the shareholders can get a bigger cut. So this is what's happening. They're forcing these workers to work at breakneck speeds in order to put out as much product as possible. Workers be damned. Let's continue. It gets deeper.
Forcing workers to maintain high work speeds in cold conditions with slippery floors and dull knives. Workers perform between 20,000 and 100,000 cutting, grabbing, pulling, or hanging motions per shift. This causes workers great pain in their hands, wrists, arms, and backs. But when they ask for a break to rest, use the restroom, or seek medical attention, they're usually sent right back to the same job they were working before without meaningful treatment or accommodation.
I'm sorry, did he say seek medical attention? Did you catch that? Not just going to the bathroom, but to seek medical attention. If I get hurt on the job at a meatpacking plant, oh, baby, you ain't sending me back on the line. No. JB don't play that. You're not going to send me back on the line if I got severely hurt. Child, these people trying to kill you just to make an extra buck. Lord.
The speed is so unrelenting that it has forced workers to urinate or defecate in their clothing on the line because of.
Oh, here we go. So you have to use the bathroom on yourself because they won't allow you to get off that line in order to use the bathroom? Didn't we hear stuff like this from Amazon? Weren't there gruesome stories like this out of there? What makes you think it's different for the people who literally pack our meat? Inhumane practices that are being done to our fellow workers here in this country. Woo! And this is coming from the Southern Poverty Law Center. This stuff has been investigated.
Employers deny reasonable bathroom use, violating workers' rights to dignity. Other prevalent types of injuries workers suffer include lacerations, amputations of fingers or limbs, chemical burns, and skin infections, and even respiratory illnesses.
Amputations happen. I want you to think about that. People are losing limbs at meatpacking plants, and it's being exacerbated by these breakneck speeds.
Now, the United States Department of Agriculture has proposed a new regulation that would make these violations worse by permitting companies to operate poultry plant evisceration lines as fast as 175 birds per minute. The organizations petitioning the commission today, along with many other human rights groups and organized labor unions, have submitted comments to the USDA urging it to abandon this proposal and inform the agency of the human rights violations in which it will be complicit. Nonetheless, it is projected to be finalized this April 2014. This exhaustion of our domestic avenues for relief is part of why we're here before the Commission today, seeking assistance. The Petitioners here today, as part of a coalition of 15 civil rights and human rights groups, have also formally asked the United States Occupational Safety and Health Administration, as well as the USDA, to promulgate safe, slower, enforceable work speed standards for meat and poultry processing plants, but we have yet to receive a response. The United States is failing to protect meatpacking and poultry processing workers from these rampant violations of human rights to safe and healthy workplaces. There is no enforceable work speed standard, and existing worker protections are inadequate to prevent the most pervasive injuries and human rights violations. Testifying before the commission will be meatpacking worker Teresa Martinez, poultry processing worker Gwen Clements, Nebraska Appleseed attorney Omed Zabi, Liz Borkowski from the George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health, meatpacking worker Juan Martinez, and Lee Pearl Dev, who is the mother of deceased poultry processing worker Bonnie Duff. Our delegation also includes poultry processing worker LaShonda Bobbitt of the Coalition of Poultry Workers, Rochelle Hammer of the Midwest Coalition for Human Rights and the University of Minnesota, Divya Prasad and April Hartsfield of the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Gloria Sarmiento and Becky Gould of Nebraska Appleseed. Thank you.
So, how do you feel about the meat that you're consuming, that the workers are being treated in such an inhumane way for the sake of profit? The meat industry is controlled by most of the meat industry is controlled by only 4 companies, which means it's monopolization. And then being able to do this at these crazy speeds to put out this product really is just because, number one, these companies are way too big. Number one. Number two is there's a lack of regulation. Number three, I say that there's a lack of democracy in these workplaces. I think we should start saying it like that. There's a lack of democracy. So therefore, because there's no democracy in the workplace, that means that these establishments are run as totalitarian regimes. I would like to say it like that. Because if it was actually a democratically run workplace, would they be ran at the speeds that they are? Let's get into the article. Two amputations a week, the cost of working in a U.S. meat plant. The blurb says, as unions warn of serious injuries, plans to take speed limits off the lines at pig plants are causing anxiety. Says amputations, fractured fingers, second-degree burns, and head trauma are just some of the serious injuries suffered by U.S. meat plant workers every week, according to data seen by The Guardian and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. U.S. meat workers are already 3 times more likely to suffer serious injury than the average American worker, and pork and beef workers nearly 7 times more likely to suffer repetitive strain injuries. And some of the fear that plans to remove speed restrictions on pig processing lines currently being debated by the government will only make the work more difficult. Government and industry bodies point out that there have been reductions in work injury rates over the last couple of decades, although the figures still remain higher than average. They argue that despite the lifting of speed restrictions, they need to adhere to strict rules on food safety that will impose its own limit on line speeds. Records compiled by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, revealed that on average, there are at least 17 severe incidents in a month in U.S. meat plants. These injuries are classified as those involving hospitalizations, amputations, or loss of an eye. Let me ask y'all something. You ever seen that game where somebody will take a knife and they'll take all their hands and they'll put it on top of a flat surface and start going da, 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 da. And then they go faster and faster between the fingers and faster and faster. How does that make you feel? Are you more able to be more precise if you go slower? If you just go between the fingers slower, right? But the faster you go, the more the risk of you missing, right? Same concept. But then once some people say, oh, well, we just got to get regulations out of the way, because if you put regulations, that's going to stifle the business. The job creators won't be able to make as much, which means they won't be able to hire as much, which means that you won't be able to make as much. Wrong. Because if you look at what they're doing, they're treating workers as disposable. Because if you lose a limb, they hire somebody else. Hey, that's just the cost of doing business. No humanity involved. No compassion. Let's continue. Amputations happen on average twice a week, according to the data. There were 270 incidents on a 31-month period spanning from 2015 to 2017, according to OSHA figures. Most of the incidents involved the amputation of fingers or fingertips, but there were recordings of lost hands, arms, or toes. Toes? Toes? What in the hell? Toes? I'm going to tell you, these people are liable to make me, my God, they're making me freak out. Record injuries include an employee's left arm had to be surgically amputated at the shoulder after it was pulled into the cubing machine during sanitation. A worker was reaching down to pick up a box to clear a jam when his jacket became caught in a roller. As he tried to pull it out, his hand got pulled in as well. His hand and lower arm were crushed. While an employee was attempting to remove the ribs from a spine of a cattle rib set, his hand made contact with a running vertical bandsaw and two of his fingers were amputated. An employee working on a sanitation crew pushed the stop button after removing parts from the upper portion of a machine. The employee then placed his foot into a horizontal grinder while climbing down from the machine, causing all 5 toes on his right foot to be amputated. I'm not going to read more because it's gruesome, but you get the point. It says chronic ailments are even a bigger issue, leaving many workers permanently disabled and leading to losses and costs, both individually and publicly. According to one published study, carpal tunnel syndrome costs more than $2 billion annually, and medical treatment costs alone for workers in all U.S. industries. Wow. Quote, every co-worker I know has been injured at some point. That was from Eric Fierstenberg. He was telling the USDA as they examined a case for implementing reforms that would include speeding up the line. I can attest that the line speeds are already too fast to keep up with. Please, I'm asking you not to increase them anymore, end quote. A meat plant worker who asked to remain anonymous told The Guardian that although he has managed to avoid injury himself, most of his friends have needed surgery at some point. If you complain about your hands, they just say you'll be fine. They want you to put ice on it during your break time or lunchtime rather than during production hours. 50-year-old worker from Nebraska says, when I get home, I have to stretch my hands. I feel a pinch. It hurts. You never get used to the work. I do it because I have to support my family. I don't have an education, end quote. Why are we treating workers like this? And don't give me the, well, they should have applied themselves better in school because if not, they should have just did something else so they can do something else. No, 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 no. Mm-mm. Workers shouldn't be treated that way. Absolutely not. There's a word that we typically try to use with workers, and it's called dignity. And you don't allow workers to look. Why do we give firefighters 24 hours on and 48 hours off? Right? Why do we give some people who are in certain industries certain protections so that they can continue to keep going? Why are we making it so that we have to say too bad, so sad to these workers because they suddenly dare to get carpal tunnel syndrome? We treat them like they're just throwaways. These people are literally help feeding this country. I think they deserve a little bit more respect than that. So they say that injury had in the meat and poultry packing and processing industries had decreased significantly over the past 25 years, reaching an all-time low of 5.3 cases per 100 full-time workers per year. It says there remains, according to the Government Accountability Office, a persistent problem of underreporting. Underreporting, meaning somebody ain't disclosing and putting in documentation of everything that happens. Also, there is loss of work. In 1994, according to BLS data, the incidence of rate for injuries from meatpacking plants was over 20. In the case of lost workday injuries, points out Mittenthal, a rate for animal slaughtering and processing was 3.8 cases per 100 workers versus 1.7 for all industries, including private, state, and local government. A number of industries have higher rates than this. However, some fear that aspects of a new system being piloted by the USDA may stall that progress. The new swine slaughter inspection program never mind. The new swine slaughter inspection program will reallocate some of the line inspection duties and remove speed caps from the processing lines. USDA estimates it could potentially save the agency more than $6 million a year. Make no mistake, a lot of people were upset during the pandemic that, for instance, the FDA, had some people from big pharma were having influences allegedly into the FDA, and for instance, like the Sackler family, with their product of oxycodone, or oxycontin. I'm sorry. How basically a lot of these big pharma companies basically had a revolving door at the FDA. You don't think it's not happening at the USDA? These meat packing industries, how much you want to bet they got a revolving door too? So of course they're going to favor the speeds being increased. You have certain politicians that talk about, well, they want to decrease regulation and all that. But the question is, decrease regulation at whose expense? Because the money never goes to the workers. It only goes to the owners, the parasite class. Let's finish up. Says, but the plans will lead to more injuries, believe unions and workers. When it's production at all costs, people are going to get hurt. Says there's really no need for this. Taking the caps off the line speed, there's plenty of capacity to kill plenty of pigs, but they're just getting greedy about it. And this is because we live in a system where profit reigns supreme. This is why there's consolidation among these companies. By consolidation, that means there's only 4 companies that own the majority of a overwhelming majority of the meat industry. Let me share this with you guys too, because I think it's important.
The big 4 meat conglomerates. They act as a middleman in the meat industry, control over 80% of beef sold in the U.S. They purchase the livestock, slaughter, and process the meat and sell it to retailers nationwide. JPS had a record annual net profit of $4.4 billion, a 70% increase from the previous year. Tyson had a record annual
70% increase over a year? Wow.
annual net profit of 4
Let's go back just a little bit.
increase from the previous year. Tyson had a record annual net profit of $4.1 billion, a 91% increase over the previous year. While their profits are soaring, ours have remained stagnant as our business costs have significantly increased. So what's the solution? By shifting to purchasing your beef direct from ranchers, you can help us change these figures and potentially help us rebuild a fairer system. But we need your help.
So it just shows how they have consolidated all their power, and it's always at the expense of workers. This is why a change needs to happen. And what does that change look like? Well, that change looks like us really fighting against this system on a fundamental level. This is why we talk about mutual aid, organizing, supporting not just unions, but supporting efforts to create worker-owned companies, worker co-ops, what have you. You can do that via, try to do that via ballot initiatives if you would like. Also, building dual power so that you can circumvent these corporations. If you know of a local farmer that already raises cows, chickens, pigs, what have you, and they actually sell the meat from them, then try to go to them as much as you possibly can locally if you have access to that. If you do have access to it, but you also know of some people who do not, maybe could you also team up with them and go in and try to get that for them? This not only helps out the local farmers and ranchers, but also you circumvent the factory farming industry as well. Because ultimately, they're doing it just for profit. They're not actually doing it because they're nice people. No, they don't want to do that way. So do what you can. If you know people who farm fresh produce, locally, or if you want to get together with your neighbors to do that, please go ahead and do that. There's many different ways that we can circumvent this. If you possibly can. If you can't, then there are other indirect ways that you can do to try to help change the system. It may not be in that industry at all, but you're fighting the fight in your sector, which, will somehow indirectly help another area within to change the system from the ground up. But this is why it is so important to speak up for workers and to constantly, be in solidarity with them. And some of these workers, there were stories came out about how there were children working in some of these meatpacking plants. Yes, children. Yes, they were violating child labor laws and having little kids work in these plants too. Some of the kids are undocumented. And let's not even get into if somebody who's undocumented, who doesn't have health insurance, gets harmed and they have to go to the emergency room. When they go to the emergency room, they don't have enough money to be actually to pay for their care, which in turn increases all of our insurance rates at the same time. So yes, essentially they get it technically for free, but who gets shafted? Everybody else is paying insurance. This is why we need a nationalized healthcare system, so that we don't get shafted if somebody gets hurt, documented or undocumented, citizen or migrant, because we shouldn't have to pay for it in that way. Now, if we collectively pay for it, in our tax dollars, okay, fine, right? But we're getting overly charged just because the insurance industry also wants to make their cut. And that's not fair either. So yes, this is why we fight on many different fronts, and I encourage you guys to continue to keep doing that. That's that story. It's crazy.